The first time I realized something was wrong, I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of it. It all started with a message. Simple. Innocuous, even. I was sitting at my desk, the soft hum of my office filling the space around me as I pored over campaign materials. My phone buzzed. Laura, my wife, had sent a text. "Pick up the baby, she's safe." I thought nothing of it. Just another reminder about the day, nothing out of the ordinary. I had no idea that this message would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, and my future. But then, just as I was about to put the phone down, a video started playing. It was Laura's face, but it wasn't a happy, familiar face that I had seen so many times before. No, this was different. There was a coldness to her expression. She was sitting with Chris, my best friend, the man I'd trusted like a brother for the better part of a decade. They were talking, quietly. The sound of their voices was distant at first, but as I listened, my heart sank. They were discussing the details of a plan that was no longer about a family or love or loyalty. It was about something darker. I couldn't process it. I watched, frozen. Laura's voice cut through the haze of my thoughts. "I took the baby. All that's left is to sell their joint businesses." The weight of her words crushed me. My wife had kidnapped our child. And it wasn't a spontaneous decision, either. This had been planned. It wasn't just a betrayal of me, but of everything we had built. My mind scrambled for clarity, trying to understand how this could happen, how someone I loved could do something like this. My thoughts raced. Was this some sick joke? No, I knew it wasn't. I could feel the cold sweat creeping down my back as I stared at the screen, unable to look away. Every word they spoke, every calculated movement Laura made, left me more and more horrified. I felt like I was suffocating, trapped in my own skin as the reality of what was unfolding took hold. It was clear now. This wasn't just about infidelity. No, this was about control, about power. Laura and Chris weren't just betraying me. They were plotting to take everything from me. My family, my business, my son. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I couldn't sit there paralyzed, not when my child was in danger. I didn't know what to do, but the first thing that came to my mind was to confront Chris. It had to be him. He was my best friend, my closest confidant. Surely he could explain this. Surely I could make him see the truth. But how? How could I even begin to make sense of this betrayal? I wasn't about to sit and wait. No, I had to act. So I called Chris. I tried to keep my voice steady, calm, even though my insides were churning. "We need to meet," I told him. Now, what I didn't know then was that I was walking right into the heart of the storm. I arranged the meeting with Chris, my heart pounding with every passing minute. I didn't know what I was expecting from him, but a part of me held on to the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation for all this. Maybe I had misunderstood something. I tried to convince myself that the video was some kind of mistake or miscommunication. But deep down, I knew I was clinging to a thread of hope that was rapidly unraveling. When I met Chris at a quiet cafe, the usual warmth I felt toward him was gone. He looked just like he always did. Charming, confident, a man who seemed to have it all together. But as I sat across from him, I saw something different in his eyes. He wasn't the friend I thought I knew. There was something cold behind his smile, something calculated that I hadn't noticed before. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the unease I felt was suffocating. I had to stay calm. I had to be strategic if I was going to get the truth. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I dove straight in. "Chris," I said, my voice steady but laced with tension, "I know what you've been doing. I know about Laura, and I know about the baby. You and Laura. This plan, you've been working together, haven't you?" His expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. It was the flicker of guilt, of recognition that the game was up. He shifted in his seat, his smile faltering for a brief moment, and in that instant, I knew. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back and let out a long breath, as if preparing for a confession. But the words that came out of his mouth weren't an apology. They were the cold, calculated admission of betrayal. "Look, Stephen," he began, his voice quieter now. "This wasn't personal. It was never about you. You were always too focused on work, on your agency. You never noticed, did you? How distant Laura and I had become. How much she needed something more. Something real." His eyes met mine, and for the first time in our friendship, I saw no warmth there, only a calculated, almost detached look. "She came to me with a plan. She was done being your shadow, Stephen. She wanted more. And so did I. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Chris, the guy I trusted with my life, had been working behind my back, plotting with my wife to steal everything I had. My heart twisted in my chest. It wasn't just about my wife leaving me. This was a deliberate, ruthless plan to destroy me, to take everything I'd built with Laura. My business, my family, my future, all of it was at risk because they wanted control, power, and wealth. It was a betrayal that went beyond anything I had ever imagined. Chris continued, outlining the details of their plan as if it was some business deal, something calculated and neat. They had carefully orchestrated the whole thing, manipulating everything from my family's finances to the company's resources. Laura had taken the baby, using the excuse of safety, but the truth was far darker. They were planning to sell the joint businesses, take the money, and disappear. The plan was so intricate, so well thought out, that it sent chills down my spine. But what hit me hardest was how they had used my trust. I had given Chris access to everything, my thoughts, my plans, my weaknesses, and he had turned all of that against me. I had come to confront him for answers, but what I got was the final piece of the puzzle. Chris wasn't just betraying me with Laura. He had been conspiring to take my share of the company. He was working with a competitor, positioning himself to grab everything I had worked so hard for. The business deal that had seemed so promising, the international campaign I'd been excited about. It was all a ruse, a way for Chris to insert himself into the company's most valuable projects, to get access to our assets and siphon them off. As he finished speaking, I barely heard his words anymore. I was too focused on what he had just admitted. The cold reality of it hit me like a freight train. I couldn't think straight. My mind was spinning with all the ways they had planned this. But then I remembered something, a detail I had almost forgotten. The camera. I had placed a hidden camera in the meeting room months ago, a precaution for when things seemed off. It was my backup, my way of keeping tabs when I couldn't trust everything around me. I hadn't expected to use it this way, but it was the evidence I needed. Without saying a word, I pulled out my phone and opened the video recording from the hidden camera. Chris went pale. He knew what I had, what it meant. I could see the panic flickering in his eyes. The truth was undeniable now. The game was up. "What the hell are you going to do with that?" Chris asked, his voice suddenly more nervous than I had ever heard it. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth," I replied, my voice cold, determined. "You and Laura will face what you've done, and you'll regret every moment of it." As I left the cafe, the weight of the situation settled in. The man I had called my best friend had just torn my life apart. And now, I had to do what I could to put it back together. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing, processing the unimaginable reality of what had just happened. Chris, my best friend, the person I trusted with my deepest secrets, my fears, had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even begin to comprehend. He was working with Laura. Together, they'd manipulated me, using my own life as a pawn in their twisted game. The baby, the business, everything I held dear was nothing more than a means to an end for them. I had evidence now. I had the truth. But the hardest part, the part that gnawed at me with each passing second, was the fact that Laura, my wife of nearly a decade, had been in on it all along. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't let this go on any longer. The video, the hidden camera footage, everything pointed directly to her. There was no denying what she had done. Still, a part of me, the part that had been with her through thick and thin, the part that had loved her for so long, wanted to believe there was some other explanation. But I knew there wasn't. Not anymore. I had to face the woman I once thought I knew and demand the truth. When I walked through the door, Laura was sitting on the couch, her back to me as she flipped through her phone. She didn't even look up when I entered. It was like everything was still normal, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I wasn't the same man who had walked out the door hours ago. I wasn't the same man who had trusted her. Not anymore. I could feel my pulse quicken as I stood there, staring at her. I needed to say something. I needed to confront her, but the words caught in my throat. What could I possibly say to a woman who had shattered everything I thought I knew about her? Finally, I spoke. "Laura, we need to talk." She glanced up, her expression a mix of surprise and confusion. "What's wrong, Stephen?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I know what you've been doing. I know about you and Chris. I know about the baby." Her face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. For a brief moment, I saw genuine fear flicker across her features, and for the first time, I knew that she knew I had figured it all out. But instead of guilt, instead of remorse, she quickly masked her fear with deflection. "Stephen, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with a nervous edge. "This doesn't make any sense. You've lost your mind." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was denying it, denying the truth that was right in front of her. I couldn't keep the anger from rising in my chest. "Don't play dumb, Laura. I have proof. I know everything about the kidnapping, about the plan with Chris, about everything." Her eyes flickered. For a split second, I saw a flash of panic, but she quickly regained her composure. "You don't know anything, Stephen," she said, her voice low. "You don't understand. You never have. You think you're the only one who knows people, who can read people. But you don't. You never saw me. You never saw what I needed." I took a step forward, my fist clenched at my sides. "You kidnapped our child, Laura. You took him. How could you do that?" She stood up, her face twisting into something unreadable. "You think this is about the baby? You think I did this for him?" She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "No, Stephen. I did this for me. For us. For everything I've been working toward while you were off chasing your damn career. You never saw me, never saw how tired I was. Tired of being your shadow, tired of being stuck in your world. You were so consumed by your work, your agency, that you never looked at what was right in front of you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just a betrayal of me, of our marriage. It was a betrayal of everything we had built together. "You've been planning this for how long?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "How long has this been going on?" Laura's gaze hardened. "A long time, Stephen. A long time. I grew tired of waiting for you to notice, to give me what I needed. I watched you pour everything into your business, your clients, your success, and I was just there. Always the second priority, always the one who had to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. I wasn't going to live like that anymore. I wanted control, and I wanted out." It was like a slap in the face. All these years I had been working to build a life for us, for our family, and all the while, she had been plotting to take it all away. And Chris? What was he in all this? Laura's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. Chris was the only one who understood me. He got it. He knew what I needed. And when the opportunity came, we took it. We were going to start fresh, Stephen. A new life, new everything. Your business, your money, your son, all of it was just a stepping stone. I was reeling, trying to process everything she was saying. "You're a monster," I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. She shrugged, unfazed. "You think you're the only one who's ever suffered, Stephen? You think you're the only one who's had to give up things? I was done being your afterthought." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a momentary lapse of judgment. This was calculated. This was years of resentment and bitterness that had festered beneath the surface, and now it was all spilling out. But even as she stood there, cold and unapologetic, I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to fight for my son, for my business, for everything that had been taken from me. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice steady but filled with resolve. "You and Chris. I'll make sure of it." I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and disbelief, struggling to understand just how deep the betrayal went. Laura's cold indifference stung more than I thought it would. I had expected to confront her, to see some sign of guilt, even remorse, but instead, I was met with a calculated woman who had been planning her escape for years. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built for us, had been nothing more than a stepping stone to her escape. I knew she wasn't going to go down easily. And Chris was just as complicit, playing the part of my friend while he was, in reality, a co-conspirator, plotting behind my back to steal everything from me. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I couldn't. The one thing I still had, the one thing that mattered above all else, was my son. I didn't care what it took. I was going to fight for him. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Laura and Chris had planned this so carefully, so meticulously, but I had a weapon they didn't count on, the truth. I had the evidence now. The hidden camera footage, the messages, the financial records, they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. I wasn't just going to sit idly by and watch them destroy my life. I was going to take the fight to them, expose their lies, and make them pay. I started with Chris. After everything that had happened, I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. I needed to make sure the evidence I had was irrefutable. I began by pulling together all the financial documents, contracts, and communications between him and Laura. There were fake contracts designed to siphon money from the company, manipulated deals that had been forged between the two of them with the intention of funneling money out of the business and into their pockets. I wasn't just fighting for my son. I was fighting to save my company. This wasn't just personal. It was professional, too. Chris had not only betrayed me as a friend, but also as a business partner. I arranged a meeting with him in my office, a place that once felt like a sanctuary, but now felt more like a battlefield. When he walked in, he wore that same smug look he always had, the one that made him so charismatic and easy to trust. But this time, I wasn't fooled. He didn't know it yet, but I had him cornered. I wasn't here to talk about the past anymore. I wasn't here to hear his excuses. I was here to end this. I laid the documents out in front of him. "You've been stealing from me, Chris," I said, my voice cold. "Not just my money. My life. My family. I've got everything here. The contracts. The transfers. The emails. The proof that you've been conspiring with Laura to take my son, my business, and destroy everything I've worked for. Do you think I'm just going to let you walk away from this?" Chris's face went pale. For the first time since I'd known him, there was no bravado, no cocky grin. He looked like a man who had just realized he was on the verge of losing everything. "Stephen, you don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "You don't understand what it's like." "I understand exactly what it's like, Chris," I interrupted, my patience thinning. "You used me. You betrayed me. And you used my company, my business, as a way to line your own pockets. You've been playing both sides, all while pretending to be my friend. Well, I'm done. And I'm making sure everyone knows the truth." I watched as he tried to process it, watched as he realized that there was no way out. There was no way to spin this. He had been caught red-handed, and the consequences were coming. As I pushed him to the edge, I knew this wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. The truth had a way of bringing everything to light, and now Chris was about to face the consequences of his actions. But as satisfying as it was to see Chris crumble, the hardest part was still ahead. I had to confront Laura. She was the one who had taken my son, the one who had orchestrated everything. I had exposed Chris for his treachery, but Laura was a different beast entirely. She wasn't just a business partner gone wrong, she was my wife, the mother of my child. And while I could feel the sting of betrayal coursing through me, I had to focus on what mattered most, getting my son back. When I confronted Laura again, this time it was in the living room, a place where we had shared so many moments together. It was a surreal experience, seeing her in this context now, knowing that everything between us was a lie. She was sitting on the couch when I entered, her usual cold demeanor in place. But as soon as she saw me, she stiffened, knowing exactly what was coming. "You've lost," I said flatly. "I have the proof. The truth is out. And now you're going to pay for what you've done." She didn't say anything at first, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. She knew that the walls were closing in. "You can't do this, Stephen," she finally said, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. This isn't just about you or the company. This was about me finally having control. About getting my life back. You were never there. You were always too busy, too consumed with work. I had to do something. For myself. For our son." I shook my head in disbelief. This was never about control. This was about greed. About using me, using my son, to get everything you wanted. "And you think I'll just let you walk away from this? No. You're going to face the consequences, Laura. You'll be held accountable for everything you've done." The confrontation that followed was emotionally exhausting, but it was necessary. I couldn't let her slip away from this. I couldn't let her destroy my life without consequences. As much as I wanted to be angry, to scream and shout, I focused on one thing: getting my son back and making sure she paid for what she had done. The battle for my son was the hardest fight I had ever faced. When the dust finally settled, I stood amidst the wreckage of my former life, still grappling with the overwhelming emotional toll of everything that had happened. The court proceedings dragged on for months, but the evidence I had, irrefutable, undeniable, eventually led to Chris being sentenced to prison for his role in the conspiracy, his actions condemned by the truth. As for Laura, the betrayal she had orchestrated with such precision and coldness could not go unnoticed. The court ruled that she would undergo psychological rehabilitation to address the manipulation and deceit that had fueled her actions. She was also ordered to pay compensation for the emotional trauma inflicted on my son. Despite the legal victories, the thing that kept me awake at night was the thought of my son. My son, who had been kidnapped and used as a pawn in a twisted game of power and control. That was the part of this whole nightmare that still haunted me the most. My son wasn't just a victim of a broken marriage. He had been caught in a web of manipulation that I had failed to see until it was too late. I needed to get him back, to rebuild the bond we once had. But the damage done to him was deep, and I knew it wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple apology or a few kind words. He needed time. He needed healing. And he needed me more than ever. In the weeks that followed, I began the painstaking process of trying to reconnect with my son. The therapist I sought for both of us helped us navigate the emotional wreckage. My son, who had once been so full of life and joy, had become distant, withdrawn, as if he were unsure of what his life even was anymore. He had witnessed things no child should ever have to see. He had been taken from his home, from everything he knew, and thrust into a chaotic world he couldn't comprehend. I could see it in his eyes, the fear, the confusion, the uncertainty. But I was determined to help him find his way back to a sense of safety, a sense of normalcy. Every day, I tried to show him that I would be there for him, no matter what. I promised him that I would never let anything tear us apart again. The process was slow, sometimes painfully so, but with each passing day, I saw glimmers of the boy I used to know. He began to trust me again, to smile when I would tell him stories about his favorite things, to laugh when we played the games we used to enjoy. But I also knew that the scars of the past would take longer to fade. I wasn't naive enough to think that simply being there for him would undo the damage. It would take years, if ever, to fully heal the wounds that had been inflicted on him. But I was committed. And as hard as it was, I knew I couldn't give up. Meanwhile, my own journey of healing was just as complex. I had spent so many years wrapped up in my work, my career, and the idea of success that I had failed to see how much of myself I had lost in the process. Laura's betrayal, the emotional and financial wreckage she left behind, made me realize just how much I had neglected the relationships that mattered most. I had poured so much of my energy into the agency, into building my business, that I had become blind to the people who needed me the most. In the aftermath, I had to face the truth that I had sacrificed too much for a dream that wasn't as fulfilling as I had once believed. It wasn't just my son who needed me, it was me, too. I had to learn how to rebuild my life, not just from the outside, but from within. I took a step back from the agency. I knew I couldn't just keep pushing forward without addressing the emotional wreckage I had endured. I needed space to process everything that had happened, to figure out what truly mattered to me. It wasn't easy. Every day was a struggle to find balance between the demands of the business and the needs of my family. But as the months passed, I found a way to rebuild, not just my company, but my own sense of self-worth. I surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me, people who wanted to see me succeed for the right reasons, not just because I could make them money. Slowly, I started to rebuild the company, but this time, I did it on my own terms. No more working around the clock, no more sacrificing my life for success. This time, I focused on creating a business that was sustainable, one that allowed me to live a life with purpose and meaning beyond the bottom line. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, an apartment that symbolized the new life I was slowly, carefully rebuilding, I looked out over the horizon. The city lights flickered below, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The weight of everything that had happened still lingered, the scars of betrayal still fresh, but I had come through it. I had survived. I had fought for my son, fought for my future, and in the process, I had found something I hadn't realized I was missing, a second chance. The world, as I had known it, had changed. It had shattered, broken apart in ways I could never have imagined. But from those pieces, I had built something new, something stronger, something real. And as I stood there, looking out at the horizon, I knew that no matter what came next, I was ready for it. I had lost so much, but in the end, I had gained something far more important, the chance to start over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful.